because so many women I see will say, we can't have that because this and this and this. So they put all of their stuff in the way, but actually are projecting all of that onto their kid. And I'm like, oh, because you cannot hold your frame, charge your body, and also receive something that you cannot even imagine could be so simple. We're going to treat this and let that be the problem. Okay. This is why your kid can't breathe.
Welcome back, guys, to the Village Sessions podcast.
Bringing wisdom home.
So today is going to be a fun topic because
Every day is a fun topic.
every day is a fun topic. This one, you guys bring a little humor in, bring some laughs because we're kind of taking this.
Because I do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Michelle has this
Oh gosh.
saying. She has this saying that's kind of like her running joke.
This
Her,
is the moment where everyone in the world gets to know what a truly terrible person I am.
What a truly straightforward person. you are.
straightforward.
I'm
She's very
about it.
direct. She's very direct. It is what it is. And the saying that she uses is, well, this is why your kid can't breathe. That's the saying. And she says it with a little love tap, I'd say, is added in. But essentially the bigger picture of that is that it's very easy for her to identify based on how women are showing up in the world, how moms are showing up in the world, what are the deficits that are like literally all over our energy that would explain the ecological picture of your child being able to create, maintain, and utilize the space in their bodies to be able to hold a charge is what Michelle likes to say in reference to just kind of your vitality. And all of this shows up with our children. The lesser, popular way of looking at it is through the energy system of the mother and how much the mother informs this process. So we're going to talk about this the whole episode. You don't need to get it down right now, but that's what we're going to unpack.
Yeah.
And then
Light content.
light content. Yeah.
It's very fun.
Yeah. It'll, yeah. I thought you meant light content.
Oh, pun intended.
I'm getting tripped up because we're talking about light so much this season. I get so tripped up with the word.
Levity
True.
and
Yes.
illumination.
Absolutely. Lots of Freudian slips this whole month.
Here we go.
First thing we're going to talk about is our featured product of the entire season.
Should we get them on?
You brought your Clydes.
Yeah.
These are
my
Clyde
OGs.
Sunset lenses. We are repping Raw Optics again today. Our favorite, top 3 favorite brands, period. And then our absolute favorite blue light blockers. We thought it'd be kind of fun to go through kind of like case studies and storytelling just as an inspiration of what can happen in your lives as a result of cleaning up your light environment in the evenings. And one particular one that I have noticed in mothers in my freely rooted space, people having conversations in there, is the match between not only the mother's circadian rhythm, but the actual entire family's circadian rhythm, the quality of sleep of their babies when the moms, just the moms, simplify and clean up their light environment. Now, a lot of that has to do with if you're cleaning up your light environment, the whole family is going to be able to benefit from that. But in particular, I'm actually talking about at night after the kids go to sleep. We shared a lot about this in our most recent episode of Rooted Families, or was it, or not episode, webinar? It may have been the Airway Toolkit one, where mothers whose children were experiencing these sleep deficits, or maybe they would have called it deficits, either they're waking up a lot at night or the kids are sleeping really, really late into the morning, like way past sunrise, waking up 9, 10 a.m. When the mother started cleaning up their light environment at night, putting the blue light blockers on, especially the Raw Optics brand, being able to notice that there was this direct fed impact into the child's circadian rhythm as well, which I just find fascinating because you go have an experience with this and it sounds a little woo-woo in a way, and yet there's so much truth to it when you go have an experience with how everything is connected with what Michelle always says, the relationship of the organism to their environment and the family ecological picture of how every decision, every belief system, habit, language, everything that that we hold as mothers is going to be directly having a relationship with our children's energy. And then I love your perspective on how you brought this into your practice a lot too, bringing this topic up with women, the circadian rhythm that you nurture during pregnancy, and how much that has to do with the circadian rhythm of the baby when they're born.
Yeah, the shared energy system.
Yes.
Obviously, as the baby is growing within you, the shared systems, like there's every system, right? The blood is being shared, the genetics are being shared, etc. So you're nurturing whatever hormonal state and whatever hormonal profile that you have, you're nurturing that for your child in utero. And then I know Nico Kennedy talks a little bit about this. She's the Brighter Days, Darker Nights gal, but she brings in that being a part in a really big picture in infant sleep in the first 3 months, and how you can actually help babies set their circadian rhythms up way earlier than what we are traditionally told, or maybe unconsciously kind of like societally given, right? We just think that most women will just think that your baby's gonna cry all night and like that's just what happens, right? That's like a normal newborn within the 0 to 3 month range. And we just didn't have that experience. And I think so much of it had to do with the amount of sunlight that I got during the day, and then minding our light at night, doing the candlelight, doing that kind of thing. And then whenever your baby is breastfeeding, if you're co-sleeping, doing those kind of things, or even breastfeeding before you're going to bed, I always consider, especially for any infants that are coming into my space and then our online space with the vessel, it's like, what are you guys doing in those moments, in the dark, quiet rooms? Are you scrolling? Is there that light on right over their head? Like, I think about, the eye exposure, even if their eyes are closed, what they're being emitted via light, or their skin is being exposed to. If you have a phone right here and there's just like blaring blue light on your baby, it's just like those kinds of things. Bringing awareness to that is gold, number one, and also sets their circadian rhythm up very quickly. I talk about that a little bit in my Prenatal Practice Foundations course, in creating the environment in your practice specifically for your clients that are coming in, especially in the pregnancy realm, being able to be the experimenter for them and show them, hey, you can actually feel extremely regulated. Your nervous system, the mother's nervous system, is the nervous system of the home, right? And so this is the piece that you get to bring in and help your babies get off to a good start with. I like that responsibility. I like taking that responsibility early on, helping women see the difference that it can make.
I remember even just the difference between my two children. One, if he would wake up at night, I thought, oh, you flip on a light, you like check their diaper, and then like it's like it's a whole process.
Like, we're up now.
Now we're up, and then we'll go back to sleep, as opposed to it feeling so much more integrated with Story. When she was born, I was amazed, and it's not really that riveting that when she was born, then we went to sleep, and then we all woke up right after the sunrise, and then she was ready to go to sleep like as the sun was going down. And then anytime that she would wake up at night to nurse, it would be this very integrated, like just roll over, nurse, go back to sleep. During the day, if she would nurse, she would be more wakeful. It was like, boom, she already had it completely imprinted
100%.
within her, that like night is night, day is day. Not something we had to teach. It was just something that I lived within my body.
We actually taught about this in a module for the generative biohabits for the first version that we did with Midline Revolution. And we had an entire lesson on how to be with your newborn at night. And like, we're just like, okay, you roll over, you do this, you have your cart there. If there's a diaper change, you turn on this little red light, if that's what you need, you like the minimal, as much as you can keep it just like so low, dark, quiet. Kids will they just naturally like fall back into whatever they were.
I love the perspective of what we can bring in our journey of self-responsibility as mothers, which we're going to talk about this whole episode. So if you guys are interested, the code is Village, all caps. You can find it in the show notes.
Cheers.
Go get your first lens or your second or third.
my lineup, what? We have two more at home. We have the yellows at home.
Let's get into it. So back to the joke of this is why your kid can't breathe. Michelle, when did you start using this phrase, and what was like that aha connecting point of, it's all right here?
Just a peek into my world is I'm an early adopter. So I'm that crackhead out front that's people are like, yeah, right. And then 3 years later, they're like acting like they own the concept, like that. That's like my whole life, right? And that's okay. That's great. Happy to be the influencer, happy to be that person, who goes out there and
You do the experiment yourself?
I'll do the experiment. Yep. Yes, I am the test tube. I will do it, And so, like 12 or 13 years ago when I first began noticing just the short longevity effect and impact of orofacial myofunctional therapy as a lead modality into the airway world. So when, parents would come in for open mouth posture or tongue tie or narrow palate, all of those things that categorize the whole airway industry now that are like the lead-in symptoms, the on-ramp to that empire, if you want to call it. It didn't take me long to get to the bottom of the rabbit hole with orofacial myofunctional therapy and even body work. And I'm like, oh, it's not sustainable to actually allow parents to outsource to a professional these things because it's way deeper than that. And this is an ecological presentation. Eventually, I moved to Dallas and practiced there and quickly became, that practitioner who made parents do things that, blah, 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 whatever. And I'm just like, what? Fine. Yeah. Yes.
Full body sun.
Yes.
For example.
Or, like tell your practitioner they need to change the lighting in their office.
Yeah.
And then I would do lighting consults before that was cool.
And change where you live with
like the location effect.
Totally.
You guys need to take about 4 or 5 vacations a year and get out of the barren, the tundra, and actually go supercharge, that kind of thing. And so when I'm able to spot the exceptions, right, the things that are incongruent for the outcome, like that's like, I can't not see it.
Too genius.
And I would look at it and be like, oh, that's why your kid can't breathe. And that's why your kid can't breathe. And that could be why your kid can't breathe.
Totally.
And then it just got more and more obvious. And of course, I wasn't saying that. I was thinking it so loudly you could probably hear it.
You can see it on your face.
Oh, 100%. It's like, I talk about like not judging, but at the same time, my face just won't shut up. It's like it really is not quiet. But that's okay. And I would think it, and then in certain instances, I would maybe a little bit more thoughtfully. Do you suppose that's maybe one of the reasons that it's like, really low and slow, but here we are, and so that that's just kind of how that began. And so in our world, especially when Molly and I have been working with people or different people in our programs, venues, containers, whatever. In order to teach, sometimes I will bring up situations where I'm like, and this is why the kid can't breathe, right? So that's how that came about. And everybody's going, I wonder if she's ever talked about me. Probably.
Oh my God.
Probably.
Oh my God.
Because I
the
don't
possibility is there.
I do not like to miss a great teaching opportunity.
100%. And the reason that this makes sense, this joke, this phrase, is because it's not that you're necessarily slinging it around to someone who has not tried all the things. It's that they're trying all the things. In fact, they're trying everything. It's this like efforted, man, I'm doing everything. And yet we're still having these issues. We're still having these symptoms. And then when you really get down to it and you're around kind of like their language or their actual habits, the in-between moments.
Yes.
Not when they're doing the things, but it's in the in-between. It's in the rest mode.
The space between the notes. It's the epigenetics of the situation. I call it the secondhand smoke of life.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's noticing how the collapse takes place, which we'll talk about in a second.
Yeah.
In this same concept applied, like the girls in my freely rooted space will know what I'm talking about because they've seen this happen so many times. Somebody will make a post. They'll say, I'm dealing with this symptom. I've been dealing with it for, X amount of years. This is what I've tried. And at the end of the post, they're like, this is seemingly unrelated, but I just feel like I just need to say this. And then they, kind of either word vomit or they say some sort of feeling that they feel like is unrelated to the actual thing that's going on. And everybody goes in the comments and they're like, no, it's actually that. It's that thing that you think is not related, but it's actually the picture of how you are experiencing the emotional current that's underneath the entire system outside of what you're trying to grasp. So let's talk about this idea of, I like your phrase that you use with bowspring too, is like, okay, that's when the eyes are on it, so to speak. What does it look like when the eyes are not on it? What is your body doing in a state of collapse? What are your patterns? What are your programmings? What are your belief systems of these in-between spaces? Do you want to expand on what you mean by the in-between spaces?
I've seen women who will like even go through True North, and at the end, they literally are like, well, now I'm just going to go back to my prior life. I'm going to let all of the generative habits that I established in the last 8 weeks go. They don't have the capacity to maintain, utilize and maintain what they're creating, which tells me the level and depth of the lack of resourcing and also their mindset, like what they believe to be true and the meaning that they're making in their lives. So the ability to take precise action and do the basics over and over and over again in a way that creates sustainability. That's an example. They allow their old programming, their old thought life, their old like way of doing things to come in and snuff out any spark of possibility of making a change and keeping that change.
Yeah,
and letting that change produce in you something that's
brand new.
That's amazing that you wouldn't have been able to accomplish another way.
Totally. The thing that also brings up for me is the chat about, you know, where practitioners are going and where we're headed as practitioners in the future. And instead of doing to people in your clinic, in your office, doing with them, what does it mean to do with them? It often requires them to be accountable to the spaces between the notes, technically, like you're using your saying. So when they're going home, it's like, what are you doing? You're coming in for an adjustment and you have this big opening, you have maybe this ecstatic moment, you have all of these lightning bolts that just come, like connections made, then you leave. And then what is the connection that you're going to bring that into your life? Like, how are you going to sustain whatever energy was created? And I think that's where the practitioner talk can come into this, is like the responsibility of the families, of the mothers, but then also responsibility of the practitioners to hold the standard for who they're calling into their practices and who they're going to be caring for.
And the type of example that they're creating for their clients.
So you can almost map this out with the concept of create, utilize, and maintain. We talk about this concept of the container a lot. Like, what is the actual container of your life that can hold and maintain changes that you make or something that you implement new? So this example that Michelle used with, you know, maybe somebody coming into her container, but if she is not alongside that, doing the work and the process of actually creating the sustainable structures to hold that and then bring it all the way through the rest of her life. Because we joke about this in Rooted Families all the time, that, and I know a lot of you guys that are in the container have already actually verbally expressed this. It's like you go through the first year and then you're like, okay, I did that with my head. And then I thought I did it. And then I realized I didn't actually do anything. No. I just kind of like read material or listened. And then you come back to it and you're like, it is so much more about the sustainable container of my body, which has a hormonal expression to it too, which we're actually going to talk about in the next episode with fertility, because that's a great symbolism of being able to conceive, being able to hold a pregnancy is the same hormonal expression of building out a container that you're holding. You know, it's like a new idea, a new conception you bring in, but to actually be able to hold that long-term, sustain it long-term, will show up in your bioenergetic state as well. It all goes together.
Well, then you bring that into what we're mentioning with the kids can't breathe. You bring that into the airway. That also is directly correlative to your son or daughter's airway, like how big it is, how much it can maintain energy, maintain shape, maintain vitality within the child.
Totally. So let's talk about this container concept for a second, because something that I really appreciate that Michelle talks about as symbolism is this concept of abundance feels really attractive, right? Like abundance of wealth, abundance of
Material goods,
fruit in the backyard, like just having a very abundant lifestyle feels shiny.
Very Western concept.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. That's a great point.
True, to have a lot.
Yeah. To have a lot.
Yeah.
Excess.
Quantity, quality.
100%.
Yeah.
And so something that Michelle will bring to a conversation, if somebody's like, you know, we're really struggling with deficits here and we really want an abundance of wealth is a great example. Money.
We can't afford it.
We can't afford it.
We don't have the money for that.
We don't have the money for that. And something Michelle will bring in as a little perspective shift is that, you know, if there's this thing over here, you want an abundance of something over here, more than likely you already have an abundance of something, but what is already filling that tank, which I think goes into the symbolism of the container. Everyone's kind of heard these examples in symbolism, but we were talking last night about just like even the quality of a container. If you think about like a paper cup, a flimsy little paper cup that has been dumped water multiple times into it, not only is the structure in the tensegrity of the material, by over dumping it with what you don't want, you are missing the opportunity for the intentional bringing in of what you actually do want. And so I like the symbolism of that concept that Michelle brings in of like, what you might be filling your bucket with a whole bunch of stuff that you don't want.
Yeah.
And so what is that? You know, like you got to identify that piece first to be able to bring in the abundance of something else. Do you want to expand on that?
So in the concept of what we want versus what we have, a lot of times it's the don't or the not that's too much. So when people talk about wanting something, sometimes it's actually offloading, like you said, the things you don't want or the not in order to have what the thing is that you want. So often it's what we get rid of or don't do that leaves space and energy and time for what we do want. For example, if a mother decided that it was her goal to wake up in the morning and go outside and spend time outside with her children, and she's like, but she already has a pattern and a routine, then she's going to have to pattern interrupt and create a new routine in order to be able to have the thing that she wants. So it might require a little bit of prep the night before to set up the coffee pot or set up some snacks or whatever so she can grab and go in the morning, which is different than making breakfast a certain way or taking the time to do setup then, right? Mm-hmm. So there's an assessment that needs to take place. We talk about this in our vessel process. And there's a way that you can actually go through and evaluate what you're doing so that you can create the thing that you want. And then you can go back through and reassess again to find out if there's even more that you might be able to do to get what you want. There's actually a way to do that. And so often I see, especially moms who are doing things that they really don't value and really don't want because it's habit and pattern or programming, because somebody else values that. They're doing it and they're not doing the thing that might actually value that's going to have the absolute quantum leap effect in their lives.
Totally.
And yet here we are as humans who are great mimickers, great copycats, you know, that a lot of times for a lot of people, they can't even come up with an original thought, right? It's okay. It's just realize that power and potentiality is there to just mimic and not even question what you're doing.
This is why this conversation, I think one of the greatest examples in the field of where we might see this or where you might be able to confront this in yourself is with crowdsourcing. So everybody knows what crowdsourcing looks like on a social media page, a Facebook group. Typically it looks like, okay, guys, what do we think about this? And then you have anywhere from 10 to 50 different responses come in. Maybe you look at the most popular one or the one that has the most likes and you're like, okay, I'll go try that. Versus being able to sit with oneself, come up with something that is uniquely an expression of what your family needs, which is a whole different concept obviously this is what we do in Rooted Families, but I think that picture of, okay, let's say you are crowdsourcing, you bring in something that might not have been the resonant choice for you, but you see that it's what somebody else wanted. And that feels like it really gives a symbolic picture of bringing in more and more of what you might not want, the excess of what you might not want. And how often do we hear that somebody gets something and they're like, oh, now I know that I don't want that. So now I'm going to go return it, and then I'm going to go get something else that I don't want. Or
so much energy expenditure.
So it's so much energy expenditure. It's
I always say we sounds big in a bear fight.
Wait, say it again.
Never heard you say that one.
What was it? Did you like that one, Kyle? We sounds big.
Come again?
Come again.
I'm going to do it again. We sounds big in a bear fight. So, in other words,
Oh, we
got
it.
You said, what do we think about
Yes,
that?
yes,
Because
yes.
that's
Yes.
the crowdsourcing.
Okay,
and my
okay.
response is, we sounds big in a bear fight.
That's great.
Because when the bear's coming, are we going to stand around and be together on that? No. As a matter of
bye.
fact, we're not.
Deuces, she says.
That's some country stuff right there that she pulled out.
We sounds big in a bear fight. No, ma'am. No, ma'am. And so whenever that comes up in the groups that we're in, I always say it is not going to serve you to take a poll on this.
Yes.
Because it really doesn't matter what anyone else is doing. You know?
100%.
Yeah.
We run a tight ship in our Rooted Families
I'm
Facebook
not
group.
having it. I'm just not having it. I'm not having it.
We have a process of what kinds of questions you bring into the immersive container, and one of them is if you want to go have an experience with learning who you are. That's why we hold the gatekeeping of no crowdsourcing questions in here. No.
Well, the very beginning of your immersive continuum first webinar is about creation, and I feel like this is your answer. Like, go rewatch that webinar. That has been very impactful for my husband and I. But that's why you guys hold the tight ship, is because we already gave you the resource to be able to do some self-creation and creation within your family unit, bring some unity into your decision making. What is for you? What is for your kids? What is for your legacy? What is for your lineage? It's all there.
Eyes on your own paper. No one else has your answers.
Well, and then too, the whole word of crowdsourcing, like crowds, like you're asking like thousands, or I don't know how many people are on the internet. Like if you have a large
Thousands.
following or in a Facebook group with 50,000 people, it's a lot of opinions to shuffle through. Is that for your humanity? Is that for your divinity and for like who you are here as a soul? Is that for you?
This is why also, just speaking of the excess thing, we had a January challenge in our Rooted Families group where part of the context of what we did was the simplification to actually build and create from what you've already invested in. And so that's interesting. You talked about the creation as that first webinar, because part of that access is like, okay, I need more, and then I need more, and my answers are over here and they're over here. Or if you pull it all in the center, it could be that you can create so much more from the simplicity. And then what were we going to say?
Well, I was going to say what I also noticed in those groups, and even in like Midland Revolution previously, what is now the Vessel, what I noticed is there will be material that is available, or there will be webinars, et cetera, that is available. And then the question comes in, it's maybe crowdsourcing, maybe not. It's some sort of outsourcing often, but they haven't gone through the material that's available, but they still want more. So that's part of the container story too. It's like
they don't want to do the introspective assessment of what is correct for me.
Totally.
And so one of the favorite things that my mentor has taught me over the years is when working with other people, if somebody says that something's correct, we always say, for you, that's correct for you, may not be correct for me. And the cool thing about that is I can choose according to the way I know myself, the things I know to be true about myself, the resources that I have access to, and what I value, what's important, what works for me, and then I can do that and then take another step if that's correct. So when somebody says that this is the way to do it, we see this in the Airway world all the time. This is the way you do it. You do this, and then you do this, and then you do this. And
it's
I'm like,
it's the toolkit or the checklist.
It's
That's
a
what we
checklist.
talked
It's a
about.
sequence of care. It's a sequence of care. And I'm like, for you. It's not for everyone, because that may not be the case. And it's like I tell women all the time when they're talking about, oh, I want abundance, I want more of this, it's whether it's money or this or whatever. But a lot of times that comes from a place where they want something someone else has, but they cannot afford to have what someone else has. And what they don't realize is that choices were already made on this end. So they already have something. But the question becomes, do you not want that? Is that done? Do you need to get rid of that in order to have the resources to do the other thing that you want to try or you think you want? And is that other thing in alignment with your values, with your abilities, with what you're able to maintain? I see people get in there over their head all the time with things that are not a good fit for them, and then they don't have the space, the capacity to actually utilize that, and it sits, right? So I tell people all the time, you've got an abundance of something. What is it? Is it dirty clothes? Is it trash in the yard? Is it, stuff that needs to go to the recycling bin? What do you have an abundance of that you think you don't have abundance regarding? Deal with that, and then make space, and then see what you're able to pull in.
We had made this reel about complaining that came from our village birth offering. And I love that Michelle really brought this home. And she's like, complaining gets you more of what you don't want. It's this constant feedback loop of focusing on what is not. And that's another reason why, to run a group, you can run a group however you want. Something that, how Kyle and I run Freely Rooted, and then how we run Rooted Families, once again, with that tight ship and that center of gravity, is if somebody is coming in there to vent or emotionally dump, we're like,
no,
here's your opportunity to rewrite this.
Yeah.
We want to accept this question, rewrite this, and hold what it is that you actually want. What's your question here?
Freaking own it.
Yeah, own it.
Just
own
freaking own it. It's time to grow up and deal with our stuff.
Totally. Which comes back to, if we bring it all the way back to the roots, laying that root resourcing foundation for yourself to be able to experience the emotional stability, to be able to even see clearly, and take out your trash, as Michelle likes to say, and being able to identify, like, how much of my life is an accumulation of absolutely every single choice that I've made, and I don't like these choices. And so what am I going to do about it? You got to deconstruct it a little bit. So let's bring this and map it back over to the Airway conversation. That's why you always start there with moms, is how resourced are you right now? Like it's like, that's kind of the first question you ask, is like, how truly resourced are you as a human? And we've talked about this in part 1 and part 2 of our tongue tie episodes. Your ability to actually be fully online and like a charged up battery is going to inform the way that you make choices. So one of these pictures of being resourced and to see with clarity is just having the spaciousness to breathe. And then, you map over, we did a episode on bowspring. We'll have a future episode on bowspring as well. We're going to do one with Amanda Sapita. Yeah, creating space in your body, creating space in your life for what you want. You're creating an inverse relationship with this picture of can't breathe, suffocation, too much. Like, if you look at that just from the symbolism alone, is it possible that there is so much fluff in your life that just needs to go, and you just need to simplify and then build up from the ground up? So what would you say is kind of the typical, like Airway story?
It brings up a lot for me when I'm in the clinical space, and the comments from practitioners come up about, oh, their airway is so small, I don't see how they're breathing, or they'll even ask a patient, or they'll see the side of the tonsils, or look at an X-ray and see the impact from adenoids or whatever, and they're like, oh, it must be so hard to breathe. I don't even see how you can breathe right now. There's some comment like that. So it puts the almost embedded command that now you can't breathe.
Totally.
And so what happens is immediately they stop breathing, right? So everybody in the room stops breathing, actually, if you really want to know the truth. Because then I'm like, oh my God, can I breathe? And
Got questions.
I'm going to take a minute here. I'm going to step out in the hall a minute and see if I can breathe. And so interesting the embedded commands of that whole diagnostic process. We also see this with infants when there's oral dysfunction, feeding problems, and then the assessment begins. And, there's a remark made about the morphology or the anatomy of
Or the urgency.
frenulum, and the urgency, right? And so we completely forget at this point risk-benefit ratios and indexes. We just go into, like anatomy and like, oh, this is a problem. And it's
Red
not causing a
lights.
problem now. It's going to cause a problem in the future. So blah, 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 which is anybody that knows me, I say, you don't treat the future, right? You treat the present. And so when this kind of language comes up, the typical flow out is there was oral dysfunction, as a child, and now they may have had frenectomy. They may even had multiple frenectomies because of reattachment. Don't get me started about reattachment. And then there was all the therapy done and the body work and all this. And now we've got tonsil and adenoid issues. We've got upper airway resistance. Now we've got open mouth posture. And then we've got all of the postural pieces that go with that. And so now the solution is, we're going to do expansion. So we're going to give the tongue enough room to go to the palate. And now, we're tracking on out. So first phase orthodontics, early intervention orthodontics. And now we're working our way up to, probably three trips to the orthodontist over a period of, their life, right? Up until the age of like 12, between 12 and 15, right? So this is where, we get into like pretty much the equivalent of a college education, or at least a couple of years of college before that child's even out of high school, right? And as I've always said before, is that the energetic system that created that initial anatomy never gets addressed, then it's never going to have the opportunity to maintain all the changes. It just doesn't work that way. Now, there are some situations, and I've seen them, and they're beautiful situations, where they've caught the right child at the right time and done a little bit of expansion, and it's just opened everything up and everything comes online, and there's this right amount of balancing of resources and space and engagement with the developmental growth pattern, and everything comes online. Those are beautiful situations. Don't get me wrong. This is not what we're talking about here. I've seen those, and they're phenomenal. I'm talking about the chronic ones that are just like, there's not enough resourcing to create the bone changes and the postural changes and the electrical energetic potential to be able to carry on with all the growth and development that needs to take place, and also deal with all of the interventions, right? So there's too many drains, not enough gains, as I say, in the drains and gains calibration, or calculation, if you will. So that's the whole big picture. And when you start talking about ecology, like that organism's relationship with the environment, things I'm seeing right now is, and I've said this before too, is, are you healing in place or treating in place? And treat in place means that this person's probably living in an under-resourced location and in an under-resourced way, and they are being done to all of these modalities. They may have even gone down the rabbit hole of gut healing and
All the protocols.
ripped the house apart to the studs to get to, the mold taken care of or whatever. And yet we're still not well, right? So now they're reaching for a laser for the tonsils, and that's going to get you maybe a little ways down the road, but it's not going to actually change anything about the ecology of this organism related to the environment. It's really not going to change it in a substantial long-term way. It's just not. So then we're going to do that until we can get an appliance in, and then we're going to crank the head open, the palate open and nice and wide, like everybody says it should be, and yet still homeostatically and from a balance standpoint, there's no way to calibrate that system with the inputs and the outputs. It's still going to be a loss. It's still going to be a drain.
And the bell curve you usually see is just a few years, basically, after the appliances removed for everything to kind of go back.
Yeah, I mean, if you didn't use retention devices, right? The collapse, but they call it relapse, right?
Yeah.
The collapse is inevitable.
And
Because
I think it's
everybody's
happening
gonna-
quicker and quicker.
It's quicker and quicker,
Right. So
so-
it used to be a longer time period
Right.
before, you know, the teeth would change or whatever was going on, or
Right.
they would have the migraine symptom or whatever.
Right.
But now that time has shortened between the removal and the symptoms.
Yep. And then you'll see people like, I recently had a conversation with someone about how they had gotten their lower fixed retainer taken out, and within a year, their teeth were crooked again. And she had had 4 children. And I said, after you got that lower retainer removed, I said, actually, your change started immediately. You just see it a year later.
Yes.
All the energetics were at play right away. So that device was holding you
Holding.
in place, even though you're fully resourced. I said, there's really no way for you to correct that just by resourcing. You've got a substantial gains versus drain, issue. And it's going to stay that way because you've got young children who are on you all the time, who are happy to pull off of you. And most of us cannot resource to the extent that we're able to make those types of changes. Now, on the other hand, we can make changes and we can bring ourselves up to a resource state and feel better, breathe better, look better, make soft tissue changes that look great. But just because you have that wide palate doesn't guarantee you that you're going to breathe better. I see this all the time.
Same conversation with, let's go in with this, and this so that our baby can sleep better, or our child can sleep better. And you're like, no.
Let's get the baby sleeping.
Let's get the kids sleeping first. And then what's left? Maybe nothing.
Right.
And maybe something, but you're
Right.
at least resourced enough to be able to make a more clear decision of what that
Right.
looks like. So you can kind of track and piece, and it's almost like a game of pick and choose. Yeah.
It is. It's a puzzle.
Yes.
It's your puzzle, right? It's absolutely your puzzle.
Well, I think some of the pieces that women will start to notice in their children when we're relating this to sleep, breathing and sleeping, right, is the snoring piece. And then even the open mouth posture, low tongue posture, that kind of thing. Where would you, I guess, like, where does the snoring and the open mouth posture and all of that come into play where we're talking about cleaning up the woman's ecology, the family ecology, or the women's energy?
Well, even just connecting the dots first of basically what is a robust system where deficits in that system would look like snoring, even be able to connect that. Because I think that even that as a concept of like snoring, whoa, I just thought that was something my grandma did or my dad or whatever, like just something that you do when you're older.
Or infants that women think it's cute when they snore, which is interesting. I'm always like, oh, that's funny that you think that's cute.
That is interesting.
It does mean something.
That is interesting. Yeah, so maybe we can just unpack like what even is snoring.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's the audible respiration of the air passing through the nose, the nasopharynx, which is the space behind the nose, and the oropharynx.
And is it the softening of the tissues or the narrowing of the
It's
tissues?
the proximity of the tissues.
Proximity.
And so the proximation comes from children's airways are naturally narrow, just millimeters wide. So it doesn't take much inflammation for that to be able to rattle, to connect. And then there's also, and this is a big one in my world, and this is one of the reasons why when women begin to do like the Awaken class, Global Bowspring, and they changed their
cranial base
all day, then that registration of where the eyes belong on the horizon, the cranial base, how the TM sits in relationship to that where the jaw is, all of that can change as well really quickly.
Then breastfeeding,
Optimally.
101. This is the vessel 101. It's like, okay, we need our head and eyes up for the jaw decompression and translation, so the cranial base gets online and sits in the proper place, and the cranial structure comes wide.
And then all of the musculature communicates with that to set that and pull on the bone in a certain way so that you can get the growth trajectory, up and out. So all of that's super important. And from a mirroring standpoint, we have the mother who is now more bodily aware, consciously aware of how she is positioning her body in space and the way she holds herself. Now the child is mirroring off of that, even in sleep, right? Which
Yeah.
is all of awakened class is on the ground.
How many times have we seen a picture of a baby or a toddler inside bow after a mother has started to take a class? Like it
Very quickly.
It's so quick.
So quickly how they'll pick up on that and do that. And so that is actually, we'll call it a positional antidote for that. And then also, the amount of inflammation that exists in most, Americans is just like, it's epidemic. It's an epidemic, right? And everybody goes to the gut and everybody goes to, the food that we eat and all that. And they're not wrong. Also, light deficiency, right?
Yeah.
So
Mitochondrial.
there's an actual red light deficiency. There's a nanometer of light that actually addresses, feeds, and nourishes the skin and the connective tissue. Also allows the blood vessels to make nitric oxide, which widens all the tubes in the body.
Well, then you're talking also about sleep and melatonin as a free radical scavenger. And it literally comes in and eats up inflammation when you're asleep.
Absolutely.
When the melatonin's high in the
Absolutely.
system. Yeah, so if you wanted to maybe segue into some stories or case studies of the women in your space, I think that would be really beneficial for the audience.
Well, that is what's so cool about the picture of just with the conversation of inflammation in general, with what these modalities are that Michelle was talking about earlier with the gut and this and that. It's almost like you can picture that as, okay, we reduce, and almost make it's the Band-Aid effect versus growing up and out. What creates the resourced and robust system that is not constantly reacting to every single food that you're putting in your mouth, And so this was really, really cool whenever we released our Airway toolkit in the fall, understanding that, like big picture concept of that. And I just made a post about this on Instagram, is that families, when going in our modern lifestyles, just like we were talking about in the light conversation, if you guys have not seen that episode, that would be a great place to start to understand, okay, this is what we do to adapt with the light cycles as we go into the fall and the winter months. And so families go into the fall and the winter months, and because we have these convenience factors, these modern pieces in our lifestyles, we don't adapt to the seasons and the cycles. We try to stay producing the same amount of creativity, energy, work, production, light in our house, blah, 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 blah. Like we're trying to stay
The same.
the same.
We
the
don't
same.
hibernate.
I feel like the best example is say you have like a child who's middle school age, and in the summer you're like full on sports, practice, yada, yada, and you guys feel good, energy, you're eating later because the sun's staying up later, etc. That switches to wintertime. You're still doing the same amount of practicing in fluorescent lights, in the gym, late at night, quick food because no one's home cooking dinner, etc. And then you wonder why your kid is sick all the time or is having these symptoms. I feel like that's the picturesque of like not honoring or respecting seasonal shifts, and then our relationship to seasons as a human being.
I literally shared this as an example in our Airway Toolkit masterclass. Was when I was a swimmer year-round in high school, and we swam outdoors in the summer, and then we switched to indoors in the winter, which was a heated not aquarium. You're laughing at me. Natatorium. And it was a heated natatorium, this like hot, cold. And then you go into this cold water, major fluorescent, not even fluorescent. It was like crazy bug light kind of lighting.
They buzzed.
Yes. And our school rented out a public school, which means that our hours that we got to use the pool was
Late.
like 7 to 9 p.m. No big deal.
Cool.
So we would be getting home so late from swim practice. And I remember just like at one point looking in the mirror and being like, I am a corpse. I'm an actual corpse. And then we would go.
You were also thinking about the chlorine
And
like
chlorine being
the mineral
thyroid
deficiency.
suppressant.
Yeah,
There's no way I was getting enough iodine. All the things that we can protect if we are getting subtle amounts of chlorine. So what I was laughing at is, or this is what I shared in the masterclass, is we would go to the state championship and everybody's showing up like looking like zombies, and we're all like, cool. We're all like in this together, guys. Like all looking like corpses.
Go team.
Go team, go. Like eyes sunken in. And there's this one team that would always win the state championship. And they would walk in looking like some sort of like straight up Olympians.
You're like, do you
Aqua
practice
people.
at 3 p.m.? Is this why you guys are so good?
They were known to have an outdoor pool that they used, in which case they were in the sun, in the cold weather, and swimming in the pool. They wouldn't heat the pool, or maybe they did heat the pool a tiny bit, but either way, they were outside swimming, adapting to the cold climate, and then they were, actively moving during the day, eating very well. Anyways, these people would walk in with like bronze skin, the most robust systems, no sunken eyes, just bright eyes, and then they would win the state championship every single year. And that always imprinted on me of not only their physicality and their radiance, but just looking at how they resource with themselves, not even consciously necessarily. It's just that their nauditorium was an outdoor pool and they just did it and they didn't complain about it. They were like, this is what we do. Anyways, case study wise, that's a fun case study
snoring.
to me. Back to snoring.
Yeah.
So when we did this Airway Toolkit masterclass, that was fun to hear these families from Rooted Families come back and overnight, even just within a day's time, because the feedback loops with our children, when we start to make these changes, just like the ones that we shared about in the light episode, even if it's just taking down the overhead lights and lighting a candle at dinner with your kids and watching how their systems respond to that, watching how your systems respond to that. Basically overnight in one day, one of my favorite shares was this mom noticed a complete ceasing of snoring, teeth grinding, and then what was the other thing? Maybe her kid slept through the night for the first time, or maybe that was somebody else. But just the quick neutralization when we are resourced as humans to see how these gains and drains work with our body, watching how just to be resourced, looking at the relationship with inflammation, and to be able to breathe during the day and at night. It's not just about at night and snoring at night. It's like, can you breathe during the day too? Do you have space in your body to be able to do that? Do you feel held and supported enough to do that too? Because they go together. Those are a couple fun case studies I can think of right off the bat. I can share more, but are there any that come to your mind?
One of the things that comes to my mind is I can tell when someone's not going to get their outcome too. So for example, like when someone's like looking for information or telling a story, if they're talking about how they made a decision because they were avoiding something or because they didn't want something else to happen, then I immediately know that they're not actually on the ground level of what they need to do, the thing that they need to do, not what I think they need to do, but what's right for that family, what's right for them. They haven't gotten there yet. They're still managing and hedging and trying not to do or have something. They're still not fully in with it's radical responsibility. I even see this in practitioners, for example, or they'll say, I'll actually maybe call them out. I'm like, you know what? What's up with your lighting? And they're like, well, this is the lighting that came with it. And I'm like, so?
Yeah.
And?
Yeah. Why'd you choose it?
Do you want me to give you 3 solutions right now to this? Because you're just going to stop. You're just going to use this like disgusting lighting to work with. I'm sorry, but you know me, I leave like nothing, like I just go in. And I'm like, okay, well now I know where your limits are.
Yeah, it's true.
Exposing the upper limit.
Yes. I see where you stop.
Totally.
That tells me a lot.
Totally.
Tells me a whole lot.
And it also tells you a lot about where they may or may not get to with their outcome.
Totally.
Right. So
and then you're the example. You're the practitioner. You're the one that's holding the frame and the standard. So now your client is not going to get past that.
Exactly. Your clients can only go as far
as you
have gone.
Right.
Yep.
That in this conversation maps over to birth as well. That this is like what we mapped out in our village birth update that recently went into it. But this whole idea of like mapping out your outcomes. If you are making a decision from a place of I'm doing this because I don't want that, it's great to identify what you don't want. Great, but it has to come from a place of self knowing who you are you are molding yourself into being and then aligning your choices in congruency with that.
At the end of the day, I always say you can tell a lot about somebody by when they get what they want and when they don't get what they want. Right?
That's my favorite thing you say.
And because it's such a revealer. And what I find is that for your child's airway problems not to become the failure, how does it become the success? By you being able to receive the success. Because so many women I see will say, well, you know, we can't have that because this and this and this. So they put all of their stuff in the way, but actually are projecting all of that onto their kid. And I'm like, oh, because you cannot hold your frame, charge your body, and also receive something that you cannot even imagine could be so simple. We're going to treat this and let that be the problem. Okay. This is why your kid can't breathe.
I mean, absolute mic drop. This is my part again where I go rewind 15 seconds a few times. Listen to it a few times, let it sink in. Do you have anything else you want to add to that?
Just that, you know, I can see the comments now. So and that's okay. Just it'll show me everything I need to know. Keep talking. I'm diagnosing you. You know, it's that kind of thing. You know, that's what we always used to say as my functional therapist. Keep talking. I'm diagnosing you. Not really. And it's true. Yeah, I would just say that it's all so revealing. And if you're willing to look at the uncomfortability of it, then you can have so much.
And this is why we say all the time how what you are labeling as the child's problem can be your greatest opportunity for transformation, starting with yourself, and then the entire family gets to receive the byproduct of that because of you living so vital in who you are as a mother. So that's kind of the take home, guys. And go ahead.
That's a wrap.
That's a wrap. That's a wrap. Once again,
See you in the next one.
You can find the village code in the show notes, and we'll see you in the next episode.